what's going on? SpaceX's Starship is delayed yet again. Is there something wrong with Ship 33? Booster 12 rolls into the Mega Bay. Is it in danger? The wait is over for New Glenn, but is it too late? Falcon 9 hits a new record and Rocket Lab wants to land on Mars. Do they have a chance against SpaceX? My name is Felix, welcome to What About It, let's dive right in. Starship updates. Flight 7 has finally happened. Yep, that's what I wanted to talk about today, but things played out slightly different. Things started off amazingly. Ship 33 was finally rolled to the pad on the 9th and quickly stacked on top of Booster 14. The first time ever a V2 ship got stacked, by the way. Then, after a series of additional tests, the roads were closed on the 10th before plumes of condensation could be seen coming from the tank farm. We watched as a frost line began to creep its way up the ship and booster as they began their wet dress rehearsal. Unlike some recent wet dress rehearsals we've seen, this ship and booster were filled entirely to the top, as numerous modifications had been made to the tanks. This is especially noticeable on the ship. The frost line shows a significant difference between Block 1 and Block 2 ships due to the increased fuel tank size. From what we could tell, everything seemed to go well. Or at least that was our belief for the first hour, and then we saw this. Unfortunately, some of the navigation warnings that SpaceX is required to file for a flight warning of operations had been cancelled for the 13th. Then, shortly after the pad reopened, the ship transport stand was moved back over to the launch pad before we saw the arms of the chopsticks close in around the ship to raise it off the booster and place it back onto its transport stand. Fortunately, that wasn't too big a deal. This was likely done primarily to arm the flight termination system, which we believe was installed shortly before the ship was rolled to the pad. Although, given the previous cancellations, it may have been destacked for more than just that. As we were still determining exactly when Starship may be ready to fly, SpaceX once again updated the launch date, pushing it back a couple more days to the 15th of January. So it's only a 2-day slip. However, the reasoning behind this is still a bit of a mystery. The most likely culprit appears to be weather, as South Texas has been exceptionally windy over the past few days and is set to stay that way for a bit longer. However, there could be some sort of problem with the vehicles. After all, SpaceX has likely made thousands of changes to this new ship design. Hopefully, whatever the problem is gets resolved quickly and they are able to meet this launch date, as I think the anticipation is going to give me a heart attack. Our live stream is prepared. I'll put a link in the pinned comment for you. Set your reminders and like the stream so that it gets shared. The longer it takes SpaceX to get Ship 33 off the ground, the closer its siblings get, and they are growing yet again. Take a look at Ship 35, which is now beginning its fuel tank stacking. The forward dome was rolled into Mega Bay 2. From here, progress on the ship should rapidly accelerate, similar to what we saw with the previous ship stackings. We likely aren't far away from having 3 operational Block 2 ships, or at least 2 operational ones and one that was operational until it went for a swim. SpaceX's progress on building these ships has been something truly extraordinary, and as they ramp up production even more, they are going to start to run into another problem: space. No, really. And unfortunately for some of the older vehicles, that means they need to go. While we were watching this piece of Ship 35 get rolled into Mega Bay 2, there was another vehicle that could be spotted rolling into the Mega Bay. I'm really hoping it's not for the reason we think it is. And before I tell you about that, our channel metrics show over 2 million returning monthly viewers who have not subscribed yet. Help improve the channel and double check that you've hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with our updates. Like this video if you appreciate the content and become a wise supporter for extra content. Secure your access to up to 7 picture galleries per week, satellite, aerial and ground photos and 3D animations. Chat with me and gain more insights on the topic you love. I'm waiting for you. You rock. Now back to the fate of Booster 12. This is the first booster to get caught by Mechazilla during Flight 5. They've decided to roll it into the Mega Bay. Unfortunately, this booster is just taking up space right now, and SpaceX doesn't exactly like to have vehicles that just take up space. I really hope SpaceX will keep Booster 12, as it is part of Starbase's history. Maybe it's just being rolled into the Mega Bay for touch-ups or further inspections to see if the catch caused any lasting damage. However, SpaceX isn't known for its sentimentality. There is a good chance that the next time we see Booster 12, it will be in pieces. While Booster 12 has a chance to stay in one piece, Booster 14.1, otherwise known as the punching bag, wasn't so lucky. It too was just taking up space in the rocket garden, and now that SpaceX has caught a booster, this catch prototype is no longer needed. That's why it wasn't too surprising to see it roll into the high bay and chopped into pieces. Unlike Booster 12, we're not too sad to see this test tank go, given that it completed its job and helped SpaceX learn what they needed to do to catch a booster, so the real question now is, will they keep the other test tank? Overall, SpaceX has been making rapid progress on all fronts, and even as launch activity ramps up and we get closer to Flight 7, it's clear that those operations aren't slowing work anywhere else at Starbase. We are eagerly awaiting Flight 7, with the planned launch able to be counted in hours instead of days. However, another rocket is debuting that may even be the only rocket with a chance of overshadowing Starship's flight. Of course, I am talking about the inaugural launch and hopefully the landing of Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket. We've eagerly awaited this launch for the past few years, and that's now finally over. This rocket is truly in another league compared to most other rockets launched today. The closest rockets for comparison are Falcon Heavy, SLS, and even Starship. In fact, in some situations it even exceeds some of those vehicles, such as the Falcon Heavy, to higher energy orbits. With 7 methane-powered BE-4 engines producing over 1,700 metric tons of thrust, this rocket is on par with some of the most powerful. And it does all of this while being partially reusable. But there is a bit of a question mark that looms over this launch and, in fact, New Glenn as a whole. Is it too late? After all, SpaceX has been able to propulsively land its Falcon 9 rocket for almost a decade now, and has stated that it considers this old technology as it develops Starship. And a lot of this success is thanks to one thing. The best part is no part. Does that sound familiar? It's one of SpaceX's core philosophies, and it doesn't just work for rockets. That's why we partnered with Incogni. 2025 is here, new resolutions, new goals, and new opportunities, right? And unfortunately also old problems. Did you know that every time you go online you secretly drag a huge bag of old problems along with you? Want to get rid of it? Enter Incogni. That bag is filled with public data. Pretty much everything that makes up your online personality. Incogni is your secret helper, ensuring that bag of private data stays private. Incogni tracks down data brokers, handles removal requests, and gives you the most valuable change for 2025. Your own identity is protected from everyone else. This is nothing new, endless spam emails and calls, but where do they come from? Those friendly messages usually mean your data has been leaked. Incogni takes on that task of contacting data brokers to remove your personal information and handling any objections that come up. I mean, I guess no one can say no to the law, you just need someone to enforce it. It's fully automated as well. Incogni is a fast worker. Just create an account, grant Incogni permission, and watch as they clean up the mess. I've tried it, and Incogni found hundreds of brokers who happily traded my private life with others. Ain't that something? Guess what? They're not trading me anymore. Take your personal data back with Incogni, use code Felix at the link below and get 60% off an annual plan. Protect your privacy, support What About It, and enjoy a spam-free 2025. Thanks Incogni. So will New Glenn really be able to compete? This one will be hard to swallow for those who aren't big fans of Blue Origin, but hear me out. I believe it will be able to compete for quite a few reasons. For starters, while it may be behind in technology versus something like Starship, that's about it. In fact, I would argue that New Glenn is now the second most advanced rocket on the planet, which puts it in a very competitive position. And the truth is, Starship isn't online yet. It hasn't made it to orbit or done any missions besides test flights. While that is likely to change within just a few months, it still means New Glenn has one thing on its side: time. Starship isn't set to fully come online and begin launching payloads other than Starlink for at least the next year, and it will likely be a long time before it launches every payload. This gives New Glenn a chance to demonstrate its capabilities while Blue Origin works out any kinks. It also helps that many missions are contracted years in advance. While the spaceflight industry is still skeptical of Starship's promises, it seems less so about New Glenn's, which has already received multiple contracts for the coming years. But that's far from the only reason New Glenn will be competitive. Even when Starship comes online, it will still be a significant competitor. That's because although Blue Origin has never built an orbital-class rocket, its ambitions have led it to build one of the largest in history. In fact, this rocket is the third largest in the world by height, and according to most reports, it is tied with NASA's moon rocket, the SLS. I can say firsthand that SLS is a beast of a rocket. It shook me good when it launched for Artemis 1. Despite its immense size, New Glenn's thrust and payload are quite a bit less due to its reusable nature. At around 45 tons to low Earth orbit, it is pretty competitive with SpaceX's Falcon Heavy at around 50 tons of usable payload. However, in the near term, quite a few things might make it a better option than Falcon Heavy and possibly even Starship in the near term, and that's the type of payloads it can bring to orbit. This is because despite its lower mass to orbit, New Glenn's payload fairing is actually around the same size as a Block 2 Starship's payload fairing at around 450 cubic meters. What also needs to be mentioned is that Starship's payload bay is currently highly specialized. It can only deploy Starlink satellites, and there's no evidence of hardware development for anything else. Of course, that won't stay like this forever, but for now, Starship is hard locked on deploying Starlinks only. This means New Glenn can launch a large and reasonably heavy payload which can appeal to more lucrative customers. So it's in the lead on that front. In the short term, it may even be better than Starship in another area, and that's when launching payloads to higher energy orbits. Due to its immense weight, the Starship can deliver a lot to low Earth orbit without significant orbital refueling, which will likely cost quite a bit for the foreseeable future. However, New Glenn's highly efficient hydrogen upper stage can easily deploy payloads to these areas without worrying about reuse. That might sound strange, but keep listening. This could possibly allow New Glenn to undercut Starship for some missions. However, one last thing, if done properly, could take it from struggling to keep up to possibly even surpassing what Starship is capable of. And that is if Blue Origin makes a reusable upper stage. This project was first revealed in 2021 when we spotted a test tank for what Blue Origin called Project Jarvis. After that, there was mainly radio silence, that is, until 2023 when it popped up again, this time in the form of a patent. This patent was for an actively cooled aerospike heat shield designed similar to that planned by Stokespace. It was filed in December 2021, around the same time active work was seen on the project. However, since then we haven't seen anything regarding a reusable upper stage for New Glenn. That doesn't mean there isn't one currently in development, as Blue Origin has a habit of keeping things extremely secret until they are closer to completion, if not already complete. So if Blue Origin has been working on this project secretly for the past few years, it could be well into development. While likely nowhere near what Starship is at, Blue Origin may not be far behind, which is a lot more than almost any other rocket company can say. While New Glenn will still be less capable than Starship, even with a reusable upper stage, having a fully reusable rocket of any kind should make it competitive even with Starship. But there is something important to note. I've said it a few times throughout the video, this is Blue Origin's first orbital class rocket. This is extremely impressive, considering everything we've already covered. However, many of the companies Blue Origin plans to compete with have built more than one orbital class rocket, and it is likely that Blue Origin will build more than one as well. When New Glenn was first announced back in 2016, we rocket enthusiasts were instantly intrigued, particularly by the naming scheme that Blue Origin had chosen. It began with New Shepard, named after the first American to reach space, and then New Glenn after the first American to reach orbit. Hence, people began to wonder if there would be a rocket named after likely the most famous American astronaut, the first person to land on the moon, Neil Armstrong. Sure enough, in that announcement, Jeff Bezos mentioned that rocket, stating that it would be a future project. Well, It's been almost 9 years now, and while New Glenn is only now entering service, it's likely that more work has been done on the new Armstrong design. When Bezos teased this rocket, he mentioned that New Glenn was designed to open up low Earth orbit to all. However, a much larger rocket would be needed for things beyond that. Looking at how massive and capable New Glenn already is and the difference between it and New Shepard, a rocket with a similar technological jump may have capabilities on par with, or possibly even surpassing, those of Starship's future variants. Put simply, New Glenn is just a stepping stone, and although much of the development on Blue's future vehicles is being done behind closed doors, it is likely being done. If New Armstrong is also said to be fully reusable, then SpaceX may have a legitimate competitor someday. Of course, this assumes that Blue Origin is actively developing this rocket as we speak. Even if they began constructing now, it would still be years behind Starship. This brings us back to my original argument. Considering that Starship is essentially decades ahead of every other rocket, Blue Origin is in a very good position. But while we wait for New Armstrong and all the other reusable rockets to come online, one rocket is already far ahead of the pack: the Falcon 9. Since it's the first orbital-class rocket to successfully land propulsively, it's had quite a head start, especially regarding the number of times it can be reused. Here it comes. It has yet again reached a record, in this case 25 launches and landings of a single Falcon 9 booster. This is truly incredible, especially considering SpaceX's original target for the Falcon 9 was just 10 flights per booster. Now many of them are reaching over 20, and we will likely see many reach 25 as well. An interesting note is also that Blue Origin's goal for New Glenn is actually 25 flights. However, given that it was designed from the ground up with reusability in mind, instead of being added later like with the Falcon 9, it might be able to reach over 25 flights. Personally, I feel that at this rate, the thing that will cap the number of times a Falcon 9 can launch isn't some mechanical issue, but retirement, when the Starship finally comes online. Just like New Glenn, many other reusable rockets coming online will have a hard time competing with Starship, however they do have a chance. Such as with Rocket Lab's Neutron, which is currently in development. Interestingly, it appears that developing a reusable rocket isn't the only thing that Rocket Lab and SpaceX have in common, as Rocket Lab is also looking to land on Mars. Yep, Rocket Lab is going to Mars. I'm not just talking about the Escapade mission, which was set to launch on New Glenn's maiden flight, but rather a completely new initiative started by Rocket Lab to not only land on Mars, but also bring back samples from it. This would be part of NASA's Mars Sample Return program, which has been getting increasingly scrutinized lately regarding its bloated budget and scheduling issues. Because of this, NASA has opened it up to private companies to submit proposals, and Rocket Lab proposed its mission architecture to return samples from Mars to Earth relatively cheaply and in a reasonable amount of time. Their approach is interesting, as they would send 3 total vehicles to the Red Planet. The first of these would be a relay satellite. This would be the primary way for the other vehicles to communicate with Earth, as the satellite would provide the necessary bandwidth to communicate with the other crafts. It'll be a link. And this probe would likely be quite similar to the ones they have already built for the Escapade missions, meaning they should be well versed in much of the technology. The second of these would be the lander spacecraft. This would be fairly similar to other Martian landers, as it would re-enter covered by a shell before deploying and propulsively bringing itself down to a soft landing. Easy, right? At this point, Rocket Lab is likely to be flying and hopefully landing their Neutron rocket, which means they should have some experience with propulsive landing. That being said, this will likely be the most difficult part of this mission. Once on Mars, the Perseverance rover will drive over to the lander to deposit its samples directly into the Ascent vehicle before it launches from the surface of Mars back into orbit. From here, the Ascent vehicle will rendezvous with the Earth Return Orbiter, the third and final vehicle launched to Mars. This craft is designed purely to return the Martian samples from Martian orbit to Earth. It does this by placing the samples into a return capsule before sending itself on a journey back to Earth. Rocket Lab's proposal has some interesting components. However, overall, the architecture appears very similar to what was already in place for NASA's Mars sample return. The main difference is Rocket Lab itself, the addition of a relay satellite and breaking it up across multiple launches. We'll have to see what NASA decides. After all, Rocket Lab isn't the only company betting on this contract. With companies like SpaceX eyeing it as well, we may have a situation similar to HLS. We'll be sure to keep an eye out for any updates on that. Who knows? Maybe SpaceX will propose landing the Starship with someone to go out and grab the samples. That's it for today. Remember to smash that like button, subscribe for more. This is what fuels the algorithm, and this is how you can help us for free. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. A new Raptor design and our brand new Starship Block 2 design are both up. Link is in the description and in the card you should see now. Also, check out our print store at shop.whataboutit.space. Buy a picture for your favorite wall. A significant amount of every purchase goes directly to our photographers. And if you want to learn more about the fascinating story of SpaceX's Raptor 3 engine, watch this video next to continue your journey. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode. Plumbers went onto the Starship. 3 operational vehicle will rendezvous from Martian orbit to Earth. Then?